Hey guys, my name is Mitsumiya, and today I am a little disappointed. You guys may have noticed that I've been enjoying my time with Battlefield 5. Even with all its bugs, its issues, its problems, at its core I could look past all of that simply because I just enjoyed the gameplay itself. Well, that gameplay has now been changed. A couple of days ago, DICE just released a major update for the game that basically increased the time to kill on every single one of the weapons. This means that at certain distances, it's now going to require you one extra shot to take someone out from 100% to 0. Now, the reason why DICE made such a dramatic change to their game only a month after its release is that they had some internal data that apparently indicated that their newer players, or their more casual player base, was playing for a couple of hours and then getting frustrated and never returning to the game. They assumed that because of the very fast time to death, which is a little bit different from the TTK, time to kill, they were assuming that people were getting taken out too quickly, not having enough time to respond to what's happening around them, getting frustrated by that, and no longer returning to the game. And while it's definitely possible that this is the very reason why people aren't returning, I have my doubts. And so what I wanted to do today is go over the reasons why I'm disappointed by this update, talk about how it's not even balanced, and all of the issues that now arise because of such a dramatic change to the game. And so first and foremost, I think it's worth mentioning that DICE clearly rushed this update through the door, probably trying to solve the problems that we just talked about, and did not balance it whatsoever. A really good example of this is the Recon class. Before, Recon had access to semi-automatic weapons that could essentially two-shot people at all distances. I know there are a couple of exceptions here, but for the most part, if you landed 2 shots, you're going to be able to take out that enemy from 100% to 0. The downside of this weapon, to make sure that it wasn't overpowered, is that they had really slow RPM, you couldn't rattle off a lot of shots very quickly, and you only had about 5 to 6 rounds to work with. Now though, if you hit someone in the arm or the leg with this weapon, it drops the damage enough where it requires 3 shots to be able to drop someone, even if they're 2 feet away. To give you a stark contrast of why this makes absolutely no sense, the Gewehr 43 for the assault class, still 3 shots up close. That weapon, of course, does not have all the hindrances that the semi-automatic weapons do for the Recon class. It has a much higher RPM, you got more rounds to work with, usually it has a much faster reload. There is literally no incentive to use those weapons for the Recon class when you could simply use the Gewehr 43 even in close encounter situations or even at a distance. It completely outclasses that weapon. Another reason why I don't think that DICE thought this patch through is because of the medic class. Not only are their weapons incredibly unsatisfying to use now, but they're just flat out terrible. There are, of course, some exceptions. The Suomi is halfway decent up close because of its blazing fast RPM. It doesn't really matter that it requires 1 extra round because you have so many flying down range, one extra isn't really that big of a deal. But for all of the others, they're just flat out awful. At 70 meters and out, it requires 9 rounds to be able to drop someone. You might be thinking, okay, that's a little extreme, but you're not really supposed to use those weapons at those distances. They're meant for up close and medium range. Well, if you're 15 meters away from someone, which you would assume would be the optimal distance for the medic weapons, it requires 6 rounds to be able to drop them. With the incredible amount of recoil that the medic weapons have, I feel like they have some of the most unruly weapons in the game when you compare them to a lot of the other classes. That is going to be very difficult to get those 6 rounds to land before they're able to take you out. Medics went from being one of the weaker classes in the game, at least with regard to their weapons, to being honestly just flat out terrible after this update, at least in my opinion. Another reason why I've been so disappointed by all of this is that it really just changes the flow of the game entirely. Before, if you were able to get a flank off against the enemy, it wasn't a guarantee that you're going to be able to take out multiple targets, but at least you had the possibility. Now, because it requires 1 extra round, this means that those flanks are a little less effective. It gives that player that's a little bit more oblivious of their surroundings a bit more time to be able to figure out what's happening and then retaliate. If you've got multiple people that you need to drop, even before, if you had the skill and the precision to drop them, that may no longer be possible anymore because of such a dramatic shift. This also has a really big impact on the attrition system. Because we only have so many rounds to work with, I was already noticing in my games that I was going through my rounds significantly faster. In a perfect world, I'd be able to land every single one of my shots, and so requiring 1 extra really wouldn't be all that big of a deal. But because I'm not perfect, I'm not a flawless player, I do miss rounds, It may require 1, 2, 3, 5, or however many shots I need to land that one extra, and so I'm just going through rounds significantly faster. DICE already was struggling with getting the attrition system to work properly during the beta in the alpha. It had to go through a lot of iterations, they had to figure out what was the appropriate amount of rounds to give players, and I feel like they did a decent job with it with the release of Battlefield 5. I'm still having to rely on support players, I was still needing to go to supply station every once in a while, but it didn't feel like it was necessary every single time that I took someone out. It felt like they found that sweet spot. With these changes though, it now seems like I'm just scavenging a lot more than I was before, which isn't really the reason why I enjoyed Battlefield 5 to begin with. Another thing that's become very obvious with this update is that certain classes have become much more predominant on the battlefield. Scouts, for example, are incredible now, and many people are gravitating towards them for that very reason. Other than the semi-auto rifles that we talked about earlier, those are still terrible, but the bolt actions are amazing. They saw no changes with this update whatsoever. Everything else got nerfed, and so because everything else now takes longer to take you out, that means that the Scout class got a massive buff, and of course everyone is now gravitating towards this class for that very reason. Another kit that I'm seeing constantly is the support class. People aren't using the Lewis or the Bren, they're using the MMGs. The reason why they're doing this is because not only do they have a lot of rounds to work with, that higher TTK, you need more rounds to be able to drop people, so that's one advantage, but also they usually have a blazing fast RPM. Some of the highest RPM weapons in the game are those MMGs. Having a fast rounds per minute gives you an advantage when they increase the time to kill. That's just the way that it works. And so I was noticing many people just gravitating towards that weapon type. I was having a hard time dealing with people that were entrenched. Normally before, it was already difficult to win an engagement against these players because they already had a lot of firepower behind them, but now because it takes me even longer to take them out, they have that increased RPM. A lot of the other weapons in the game are much slower, and so they have a much bigger advantage. And so once again, it just seems like they threw the class balance out the window with this update because of these changes. I think the biggest reason why I'm disappointed by all of this though is that DICE acknowledged that the community, the core active community, really enjoyed the time to kill. This is something that I think everyone acknowledged that was one of the best parts about Battlefield 5. Even with all its problems, with all of its issues, at its core, it was an incredibly satisfying experience because of that TTK. Where problems came up, though, was with the time to death, and I think for the most part, the community all agreed that that was an issue that DICE needed to resolve. If you're getting one-shotted by a Sten, which does not have one-shot capabilities, and you're getting taken out in one frame and having no time to react, that's very frustrating. But that seemed to be more of a netcode related issue. Yes, in a perfect world, you would think that if something can drop someone in 1 second, that it would take them 1 second to die, and that would give them time to react. But because this is the internet and you need to send information from your computer or console to the server to that player, that isn't always the case, and we have the problems that we have right now. And so instead of trying to fix, admittedly, a very difficult problem, it is not easy to have good netcode. It is something that all developers struggle with. Instead of trying to fix and resolve that issue, they just slapped on a band-aid fix, in my opinion, by increasing the time to kill to try to make that time to death a little bit more manageable. Another reason why I'm so upset about this is that we don't even know if this is the very reason why people are leaving the game to begin with. Maybe DICE has done some internal data, they've done some surveys to ask people, hey, why'd you leave Battlefield 5? And that was the thing that they landed on, but it could be pretty much anything at this point. Battlefield 5 is not a polished experience. It has a lot of bugs and glitches, and so who's to say that someone didn't get into an infinite loading bug where they literally couldn't join a match because it wouldn't load, and then just left to play something else and never returned. That's a distinct possibility. And so all in all, I think that's what it really just comes down to. DICE acknowledged that the core community really enjoyed this aspect of the game, said we don't care and we're going to change it regardless, and we're also going to rush through this process and make sure that it's horribly balanced when we do come through with this update. And so I think that is why I've been so disappointed with all of these changes. But yeah guys, that is about it for today's video. I realize that this was a pretty big rant. I normally do not like to be negative. Like I said, I've been having a lot of fun with Battlefield 5. I still think it's a good game. There still is the core conquest, so if I want to play with the old way that the game worked, I still have that available. but I just do not like the direction that DICE is taking with this, and so I wanted to express my concerns. Let me know what you guys think about all of these changes. Do you agree with the way that DICE is handling things? Would you like to see things reverted back to where it was? Or do you think that there should be some sort of middle ground? I will admit that some weapons probably could have used a nerf. The Guver 43, for example, being able to 3-shot people at like 100 meters and out was probably a bit too powerful. But what they did with it and how they adjusted a lot of these weapons felt like they pushed things too far. And so give me your guys' thoughts down below. But yeah, guys, until tomorrow, have a good one and take it easy.